The opportunity to address the August gathering on the occasion of inauguration of the Literary Association of National College, Tamil Nadu, India. By the time I am screening my share, I feel really honored to share my ideas on the interesting topic given for me, literature of the East in the language of the West. My heartfelt gratitude to the National College management who have invited me, and my sincere thanks to all the audience from Bangladesh and India present here. I hope my screen is visible and I can go ahead if the organizers give permission. Sir.
Sir, please go ahead.
Okay. My screen is visible?
Let me check it.
Yes, sir. The screen is visible.
Okay. The topic, literature of the East in the language of the West. My first observation would be East and West are complementary to each other. When the Literary Association of National College is inaugurated, I suppose the East and the West are merged, and it will be clear in the next stages. I should like to start my deliberation with a poem from my book, Jolsagorer Jolosaghorer Nityopotioshi Chad. I would explain its relevance and significance in the next page. Let me read it first. Macbether Mrityu, the death of Macbeth. দরজা খুলে বসে আছি, কখন আসবে সখা মৃত্যু আমার। আশ্বাস পাইনি অনন্ত বাঁচার, তাই নিশ্চিন্ত নই যেমন নিশ্চিন্ত ছিল মহিষ বৃত্ত হিরণ্য। দেবতার বরে অমর ছিল তারা, তবু শব্দে ছিল ফাঁকি, নিয়তি এড়াতে পারেনি কেউ, পারেনি ম্যাকবেথ। মৃত্যুর জন্য তৈরি হও, বীরনাম বন হাঁটছে, হাঁটতে হাঁটতে চলে এসেছে ডান্সিনেন দুর্গের কাছে। মূঢ় তুমি ম্যাকবেথ, ডাইনিদের কথা বিশ্বাস করেছিলে, রাজ হত্যায় রাঙিয়েছ হাত, ভেবেছিলে কোনো মানবের হাতে মরবে না। তা কি হয়? ডানকান কি দেয়নি অভিশাপ? ব্যাংক কি চায়নি সর্বনাশ? অনুতাপে আত্মহত্যা করেছে লেডি, লোভে পাপ, পাপে মৃত্যু, অমোঘ নিয়ম। ভাবতে পারোনি নারীর গর্ভপথে জাত নয় এমন মানুষও আছে পৃথিবীতে। ম্যাকডাফ তোমার মৃত্যু দূত। ম্যাকবেথ, আমিও জানি না মৃত্যু আসবে কোন পথে, দরজা খুলে বসে আছি, কখন আসবে সখা মৃত্যু আমার। Here the poet uses the myths and symbols of the East as well as the West in order to communicate his idea of unknowability of death, seen as a personal friend of him, an intimate friend of him. This is an instance of how the East and the West interact through literature, how the two are combined in the poetic enunciation, in the poetic creation to evoke a mixed feeling and interpretation among the audience, how polar differences in aesthetics are fused into a transcendental wisdom. The far becomes near, the unfamiliar becomes familiar with a greater proximity of the vision of life and world. I call it the magic of Occidentalism. Literature is crucial for any society to flourish intellectually. A civilized and cultured society is watermarked by the volume and quality of literature that it produces in a span of time. If we analyze any golden era of any civilization, we will trace elevated literature as its essential property. I consider literature in a broader perspective. It includes not only fiction and poetry, but all kinds of prose that is written for scientific, commercial, social, and spiritual purposes, directly or indirectly bolstering developmental activities and enhancing livelihood. Indian subcontinent is famous for its ancient literature. Ramayana, Mahabharata, and other treasures of spiritual, philosophic, scientific scriptures has little parallel in the world. The Meghadutam of Kalidas has inspired generations of poets to compose sublime verses, letting loose their imaginative spirits. In the modern tradition of romantic poetry, his influence cannot be ignored. The floating clouds traveling from the gloom of prehistoric era enter the illuminated ego of the modern poets and drench them with a torrential shower of divine pleasure. The world history of literature is carved by the mutual influences of the East and the West. It is not unidirectional, it is bidirectional. Sometimes the wind has blown from the East to the West and sometimes from the West to the East. It is again connected to the political history of the world. The dominant force has exerted its influence on the other side. The empires that had greater military power occupied new territories, introducing new practices to the new people, and thus knowledge was transferred and exchanged as a byproduct of confrontations and conquests, which was, however, not so peaceful. In the ancient world, the Egyptian, Chinese, Indian, and the Persian civilizations flourished in the eastern part of the globe, and they were rivaled by the Greco-Roman civilizations in the West. In the Middle Ages, the Arabs took the center stage and dominated the civilizational ethos. The European domination started after the Renaissance in the 14th century, making way for colonization, and the domination still continues in the form of industrialization. The intellectual backbone of the modern civilization has been established by the Europeans, and as an extension, the Americans, who created modern science and innovated technologies, shaping the life and thoughts in the Western mold. Modern literacy, education, and literary enterprise are the direct results of the Western paradigm. Without Descartes, Hume, Hegel, Newton, and Einstein, there is no modern philosophy and science, again, without which the modern Eastern epistemology falls into a vacuum. The East is West. Why do the Eastern intellectuals look to the West for the approval of any of their splendid deeds every now and then? It cannot be fully accounted for by the argument of colonization and its psychological effects. The deeper reason is the supremacy and the pragmatic value of the Western order, coupled with its longer convention. The Western imprint now seems to be permanent. The British Raj introduced English-based modern education system to the subcontinent in the early 19th century, and since then there is no retreat. The large mass was attracted to the English brand as it offered better employment opportunities and better livelihood. The English educated local people attained a Western outlook and became Saheb and Babu. Many of them ignored the indigenous language and culture and started speaking in the foreign tongue in foreign garbs. I do not want to say that it was bad in itself. Somebody who wrote in English presumably enjoyed greater prestige in society as he or she carried the dominant flag. There is a dilemma here: to write or not to write in an alien language. To write in English means a kind of dissociation from own people, but not to write despite capability may mean a sort of waste of intellect. The African English writers faced the same dilemma when the question of medium of writing arose. Chinua Achebe could never become Chinua Achebe if he did not write in English. Things could never fall apart with such a worldwide explosion. The international fame ensues from adopting an international lingua franca. It has to be understood in proper light. Dilemma over, the writer is either in this side or that side. The controversy never ends. Any decision in the writing career has its own implications. Do the East need the language of the West at all for its intellectual and literary exercises? The question is irrelevant because the language has already been digested into the system of the Eastern physiology. The West has been a part of the East. Occidental blood flows through the Oriental veins and arteries. The integration has never been effectively challenged, so it only strengthened in course of time. Local people seem to have accepted the reality and now would not realize or contradict the nuances of linguistic imperialism. The East can now see its own image reflected in the Western mirror and be amazed, even with a feeling of pride. It is true that the East got the language of the West as a colonial legacy, but a vigorous involvement made the language even more lovable than that of the local vernaculars in many cases. It has been a vehicle of logical thoughts, useful in governance, media, higher education, research, trade and commerce, diplomacy and international relations, and of course literature. The East produced an array of English writers who could significantly contribute to the world literature when the East writes in the language of the West. It makes a palatable mix of two different orders, two different tastes belonging to different geographies. Who is the audience of the Eastern writers in English? That is a valid question. Primarily, audience is local, having a knowledge of the language. Secondly, and more importantly, an international audience is always there to appreciate their productions given the stuffs reach up to them. Some writers obviously write to fulfill the demands of the local audience who get their feed through regional popular newspapers and journals. Other writers have lofty objectives and they keep international audience in their mind when they write. They carefully choose international platforms for writings. This division is not very sharp, however. Writers often become local intentionally or unintentionally. Being a multi-provincial country, India recognizes English as the second language for the facility of intercommunication among the people of different regions. Therefore, English is used widely for practical purposes, which creates an opportunity for the local writers. They get a local market of English, which is significantly large, and publishers also feel encouraged to publish their works for the capable readers. In comparison, Bangladesh has a small English market. Here, the English writers get a ventilation only through a limited number of English newspapers and publishing houses. Here, the best writers usually write in Bangla. Ground fertile, prospects high. Decision is writers. What inspired R.K. Narayan to write in English? Certainly, he wanted his fiction to be appreciated by the international audience, and he dreamed of carving a niche in the world literature. He was successful in his mission ultimately. His success inspired next generations of fiction writers, of whom the most prominent name, according to me, is Salman Rushdie, who is famous for his artistic narration and narratives, and infamous, unfortunately, I should say, for his religious doctrine. Others just followed suit and gained moderate to high acclamations. The English writers of India today enjoy both the local and global readership. It is not impossible that R.K. Narayan and others witnessed the Nobel Prize achievement by the versatile genius of Bengal, Rabindranath Tagore, in 1913. Tagore translated his own poems and songs and published under the title Gitanjali. He wanted to share his poetic and spiritual visions and ideas with the then global audience, and he did that effectively. Tagore's was the first Nobel Prize in the subcontinent and Asia, which stirred the whole world. It is undoubtedly the most significant event in the history of writing in English in this part of the globe. Henceforth, English is honey, and any aspirant would like to be a honey bee. Mulkraj Anand and Raja Rao were contemporary to R.K. Narayan and earned name and fame with their English writings, adding golden chapters to the literary canon. They were principally concerned with Indian life and values, tradition and modernity, humanity and deprivation. Anand's Untouchable touches the mind of readers when Bakhar's public shaming turns intolerable. Rao's Kanthapura gives a voice to the marginalized section of people who desire emancipation from social and political tyranny and oppression. Writers like Rudyard Kipling and E.M. Forster, who had the facility of native English, took interest in India, but they could not go as deep as that of Narayan, Anand, and Rao. The feminine force of English writing is also not negligible in the subcontinent. An author whose name should be uttered with great reverence is Anita Desai, who has the rare quality of depicting events in real life setting. We can measure her clarity of thought in clear light of day and the village by the sea. Rich imagery and vocabulary make her fiction enjoyable. A later generation writer, Arundhati Roy, received international attention for her writings, but she is rejected by many for her debatable political stance and activism. Her God of Small Things has a literary agenda, but her Ministry of Utmost Happiness is only a pack of political propaganda. She often disgustingly appears to be the queen of concoction. Many other Indian writers shot into prominence with their praiseworthy writing in English, hitting the list of bestseller and garnering various national and international awards. Khuswant Singh, Nayanthara Sehgal, Vikram Sheth, Amitabh Ghosh, to name just a few. Of the younger ones, Chetan Bhagat, Kiran Desai, Preeti Shenoy, Aravind Agida, and Amish Tripathi may be mentioned. From Bangladesh, we get a couple of names quite famous for their writing fiction in English. Tahmima Anam got the Commonwealth Writers' Prize 2008 for her novel A Golden Age. Zia Haider Rahman won the Gemstate Memorial Prize for his 2014 debut novel In the Light of What We Know. We should not lose sight of what happens on the sidelines. We find an astonishingly large volume of writings of high quality in the areas excluded from pure literature. For example, politics, history, economics, spirituality, mythology, legal affairs, and sciences. I can just cite only a few examples. S. Radhakrishnan, Indian philosophy; R.C. Majumdar, The History of Bengal; Amartya Sen, The Argumentative Indian; Shashi Tharoor, An Era of Darkness; Rajiv Malhotra, Being Different; Sadhguru, Inner Engineering; Deepak Chopra, Meta-Human; and Sanjeev Sanyal, The Indian Renaissance. If we include the spoken discourses in the list, including YouTube videos of late, then the volume will be virtually immeasurable. The Indian Ocean, indeed. The Eastern intellectual exercise in the Western tongue has curious implications for linguistic change. It widens the possibility of code mixing, code switching, and borrowing. Many subcontinental writers, in order to give a local color in their fictions, used vernacular words and idioms when they wrote in English, having an impact on English lexicography. As a result, the words like yoga, guru, mantra, avatar are now recognized as English words. With a familiarity of both Bangla and English, the people in Bangladesh often create Banglish, and the same happens in India from a mixture of Hindi and English. The literary discourse has a dimension of translation. In the struggle of exposure to the wider world, the notable works produced in local languages are translated into global ones. On the other hand, the treasures, the gems of world literature are also rendered into local languages. In the process of translation, many foreign writers have become household names in academia. Here, the students learn the names of Shakespeare, Wordsworth, and Tolstoy as they learn Rabindranath, Nazrul, and Sharat Chandra. And the local psyche gets a wash. The regional writers are illuminated by remote wisdom, often changing the patterns of writing. Pancho Kavi, 5 great Bengali poets of 30s, are the best examples in this regard. In conclusion, where do we arrive? What realization do we derive from the discussion of literature of the East in the language of the West? The West had might and it acquired a right to rule the East. The East got a new light. Old and new flames were mingled into a spectacular laser show of new intellectualism. It continued to thrive and still continues with greater vigor with the support of globalization. Now the literature of the East in the language of the West is more stable, more promising, and more powerful. We can bask in the fatal glory and consume the fruits of the hybrid tree, maybe genetically modified, sweet or sour. So that was my written presentation, my written speech. Now I should like to utter formal words of inauguration. I am happy to declare the Literary Association open for this academic year 2020-2021. I hope that the association will shape the younger generation by providing them with ample opportunities to explore language and literature. My best wishes to the students, teachers, and the management of National College, Trichy. And as a postscript, I have a humble proposal. The Literary Association of National College starts its journey as it is inaugurated today. The English Department of Daffodil International University, where I work, has an English Literary Club, ELC. Can there be collaboration between the two bodies? Can joint literary functions, maybe online, be organized with the participation of teachers and students of the two institutions? Please think about that. And before I finish, I express my heartfelt gratitude to these personalities: Professor S. Deepan, Vice President, National College; Dr. R. Sundara Raman, Principal, National College; Thiru K. Raghunathan, Secretary, National College; Dr. Vasanthan R., Head, Department of English, National College; and last but not least, who made a connection, Dr. J. Karthikayan, Professor of English, VIT. I thank all the audience who have joined from Bangladesh and India and other places. My sincere regards to them, and that should be the end of my speech. Thank you. Thank you so much.